So once we have our controller, it creates us a standard view, the index page, or we can go ahead and create views of our own. So first of all, to create a view of our own, it's simply a case of copying the syntax of what's already written here. So it's just public, we want a return type of action result, and then we give it whatever the page wants to be. So for example, it could be product details. And what we want to do is return a view. And that's now ready to go. But of course, there's no corresponding HTML. In fact, if we right click on either of these and say go to view, it will say unable to find matching view. So what we want to do first of all is create the view itself. So we right click on the name of the view and we simply create add view. In the box that comes up, it's best to leave the view name as the same. The template will be, we can get the Visual Studio to generate the view based on some fairly common techniques. So for example, we can make it create a create page or a delete page or a details page or an edit page. For now we're just going to say empty with no model. If we was to choose one of these, for example a create page, it would then ask us to go on and create and select a model. So for example, once we've created our data layer properly, we'd have like product in here and customers, and we'd select that. But we'll do that later on in the course. For now, just select empty without model. We can create it as a partial view, we'll come back to that later on, and we can use a layout page. More often than not, you will just use the standard layout page, and so we will leave that as default. Again, we'll look out at layout pages very shortly. For now, just click add. So all it does, it creates us a very simple empty page. You'll notice these special tags here, the @ symbol followed by a curly bracket and then a closed curly bracket. This is to tell the view engine that anything between these curly brackets is actual inline code. As a general rule, you want to keep those to as minimum as possible so that we don't mix too much between the code and the HTML. But obviously we want to create a data-driven application, so it is going to be inevitable. All this code is doing is it's setting the title to index. Don't worry about that too much at the moment. And then finally we simply have a HTML tag, a header to tag, and we've got index in the middle. So if we would start this, because we've clicked start while on the page in the editor, it takes us straight to the page. And as you can see, we've still got our menu. I will show you why that is in a second. And then we've got simply the index that was between the index tags there. Let's just zoom that in. Okay, for now, just stop that. So the first thing we'll look at is, how did it get the header? Well, the reason why it got the header is because we have what's called this view start file. And by default, as I say, pages inherit from this view start file. As you can see, all the view start file does is set a layout, and it's setting the layout to views, shared, layout. So if we look through our views folder, we find the shared folder, and then we will see this layout folder, layout file. So let's have a look at this. Now we can see a significant amount of HTML in here. So we've got our basic HTML setup, we've got a header tag, and in here we have, let's zoom in, we set some basic meta information. We set the title to @viewbag.title-asp.net application. We have a styles render and a scripts render. Finally, we have the body, and in here we have a number of tags and CSS comments and some links. This is all basically building our header page that we saw. And then you will notice this bit here, render body. Now when we create a page, for example our index page, this page gets injected into this section here where it says render body. So for every page that inherits or implements this layout page, it will always have all this information at the top. It will render the actual body of our page that we are creating, and then it will carry on rendering, and as you can see it then creates as a footer, which is where we got the copyright information from, and finally we have some more scripts.render, and so on. Let's go through this step by step. First of all, we have this viewbag.title. So the @viewbag.title is, if we look at our index page, we have this setting here. So here we are saying the viewbag.title is index, and in here it is saying we want to have the viewbag.title. Even though we've not got the curly brackets, because we've got the @ symbol, it's telling the engine that it's using some inline code. So it's then trying to read that we have set in the page, and then it's tagging on my ASP.NET application. So if we just remove that, we've got viewbag.title, and then go back to our page there and run it. You'll notice that the title of the page, that's this here, is index. If we go back in here and change this to product list and save that, and then reload this page, you'll notice that that has now been updated to product list. The next thing I'd like to show you are these styles and scripts renderers. Now these work in conjunction with the bundle config. So as you can see, we've got styles.render, and it's rendering content/CSS. So if we look in our bundle config file and see all these bundles, you will see we have a bundles.add new style bundle content./CSS, and then it says to include the files bootstrap.css and site.css. So what that is basically saying to do is, when we get to this line here, go to the bundle config, look what files we want to include, so bootstrap.css, site.css, and then write them out. Same again here, but for scripts, so it wants to render the bundles modernizer. Again, if we look through, we will see the script bundle here. Bundles modernizer will tell it to implement this scripts modernizer script. So if we went back to our actual page and then right click and say view source, you will see that the effect of that is it's creating our link tags for us here, which are then linking to our bootstrap CSS file, our site CSS file, and our modernizer JavaScript file. Again, if we go to the bottom, we'll see more scripts here, which again are all from these renders here. The final bit I'd like to show you is this here, @HTML action link. This is for a way of creating links within your page. So for example, we've got home, index, about, and contact, and as you can see, let's just close that down, they represent to these. So as you can see, for the about page, it's created an action link to the, that is the first bit is what it's actually going to display in the text. The second bit, if we hover over, we can see is the action name, and the third bit is the controller name. So what it's going to do is going to create a HTML link to that action on that controller. So if we look at the home controller, you can see we have got an action called about, and it is going to build that link file, and so that when we get to our actual page, if we hover over, we will see that it's taking us to home about. Now the reason why we do it that way rather than just hard linking is that it gives us the ability to move things around within the application, and provided we update the backend code, these action links will automatically update themselves to point to the correct location. So the next thing we're going to do is just put some basic HTML in. So for example, we could have a span tag and we can just say hello world. If we save that and go back to our product index page, just hit refresh, and there we go, we have our tags. Unfortunately, that's not overly useful for our application. What we want to do is send some information from our controller through to the view. So how do we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. The first is we use something called the view bag. So just stop that running, and we can say view bag dot some message equals this is a message from the controller, and then let's just build that. Don't forget the semicolon. So if we start that again, let's just go to product. So of course, so we've added a view bag and we've created a variable called some message. So what we can do now is in our index page, we can say at viewbag dot some message. Now unfortunately IntelliSense will not actually bring it up, so if you're not sure, let's just close that down, what you actually called your variable, you could just copy and paste it. There, I've got it right. So let's go back here, let's reload the page. So there you go, it's injected that text from the controller into the actual page. But again, in a real world scenario, although that is very useful to pass messages back, more often than not you want to actually send actual data. So the other thing we can do is pass what's called a model. Now a model is a data definition, and it can be something as simple as a string or an integer, or it can be a complex model, i.e. one of your classes. So as a quick example, let's go to our models folder and let's create a class. So what we're going to do is create a product class. So we'll call that product, and all we're going to have in here is some very simple information. So we shall have product int product ID, and we'll have string product name. Save that. So what we're going to do back in our controller is we're going to create what's called a list, which is a collection, and in a list we can have a collection of pretty much anything we want. We can have a list of strings, of integers, or we can have a list of complex types, for example our product. So we say list product. Now it's not found it because if we look, the namespace is MVC starter models, whereas the namespace for our controller up here is controllers. So if we right click, resolve, and say use the models, so that will find that, and we shall call that products. We'll say equals new list of products. Okay, so now let's actually add something in. Products.add new product. And what we can do when we define products like this, we can actually use the curly brackets open and shut to just to enter some information. So we'll have product ID 1, product name equals product 1. Now let's just copy that. And save it. Now what we want to do is we want to pass that list of products back as part of the view. So in the brackets of the view we simply type the model that we want to send in. Now what we could do is we could manually hook this up in here, but it is usually far easier just to delete it if you've not already put information in, and get Visual Studio to recreate that page for you based on your new product. So again, right click index and say add view again. We'll keep the same layout page, but this time we're going to say list. We're going to say a model class of product. We're going to leave the data context class empty. So click add. Now it's a little bit more complicated than it's created forward. We've still got the title. Let's update that to product list. We've got our title here. Let's change that to products. We've got a link here for creating a new one. We don't really want to worry about that just now. But as you can see, what we're doing here is we've got at model, which is saying we're going to have a variable called model, and it's going to be an IEnumerable, which basically means it's just a list of MVC starter.models.product. So as you can see, we're giving the full namespace to the actual product class. And then we can start using these HTML tags. So we can say HTML display name 4, and then what we're doing is we're saying we have this what's called a lambda expression, which is basically just saying get the model and get the product name from the model, and it's saying that is what the title is going to be, i.e. the name of the class, the name of the table header, and then we're going to do a for each item in model, because model is a list of products. So it's going to say iterate through them, and for each product we find, list out the product name. I'll just get rid of this last column here because we don't need it. Save that. So let's just build that. And what we shall also do is in our product controller, we'll just hit a breakpoint here, and then we'll run it. So we'll go to product. So by hitting the breakpoint, it's interrupted the code where we want to be. And what we can do, we can press F11 on the keyboard to step through the debugger. So the first thing we do is it creates us an empty list of product. You can see that, and at the moment products count is 0, but then as we go through, we're going to add each of these products in. So now the products has a list of 3 products, and it's returning that into the view. So we'll just click continue to make it finish processing, and so as you can see, it's iterated through each of the products, displaying the product name. And that's how easy it is to send information through to a view.